Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Duke. Welcome to another episode of The Takeaway. One of my favorite moments of the week is when I get to talk to Alex Newman, our Crackerjack correspondent, about his latest articles written for our own discreet site at FreedomProject.com. Alex, welcome back to The Takeaway. Good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you too. Thanks so much, Duke. Great to be with you.
Now, it's always amazing to me, whenever we see these outrages in schools across the country, there's certain states that keep popping up. California, predictably, Massachusetts. But for some reason, Florida is probably the reddest state in the union, which seems to have a disproportionate amount of educational outrages. I mean, we expect them in California, New York, places like liberal enclave states, but why does Florida keep popping up, number one? And number two, that's our segue to talk about our latest outrage, where a teacher in a fifth grade elementary school classroom demanded that her students refer to her by her transgender pronouns, and that caused quite a bit of outrage. Could you address those two issues for us?
Sure. Well, thanks, Duke. And, I think Florida is such a big state. We've got like 22 million people, and we are a pretty conservative state, actually. Our legislature is just absolutely dominated by Republicans, some of whom, of course, have duped the voters into believing they're conservative. But, generally, Florida is pretty conservative. But we do have some hardcore liberal enclaves, and that's really southeast Florida. I mean, you can look at the map of Trump versus Hillary, and you'll see that almost the whole state was Trump. And then we had a little enclave in southeast Florida where we've got lots of liberals, a little enclave around Orlando where, a lot of liberals have moved in lately. And then, of course, we have Tallahassee, our state capital, where all the bureaucracies and the Florida State University and a bunch of liberals are concentrated. And as it happens, this fiasco with a government school was in the Tallahassee area. It was at the Canopy Oaks Elementary School in Leon County, which is where Tallahassee is. And, I think it's representative of the broader issue, though. And, these types of things do tend to happen more in these liberal enclaves, I would guess, because the political class is more liberal and, they live in this kind of bubble where, they just get, all the people around them believe the same kind of nonsense. And so they think they can get away with it a little bit easier. But unfortunately, I think this is a problem throughout the state and throughout the country.
Tell us a little bit about this particular outrage in Tallahassee, in an elementary school, nonetheless. Tell us about this teacher and his/her/its/ who the heck knows gender identity.
Yeah, well, it really shows you how far this gender ideology or gender confusion, if you will, has spread, where you now have elementary school teachers. This was a fifth grade teacher, supposedly math and science. I doubt there's much science going on in this classroom unless you believe, global warming propaganda and transgender ideology and, that we came from slime from monkeys. Unless you believe that that's scientific with no alternatives, there's probably not much science going on here. But this teacher, she sent a letter home with the little children. We're talking 9, 10-year-old kids, telling them that I prefer that you use my gender-neutral pronouns and terms. She wanted to be referred to as Mix Bresic. Seriously, MX as opposed to MS, pronounced Mix Bresic. And she told the kids that, I would really appreciate it if you would call me Mix, and I don't use regular pronouns. You can please call me they or their, right? So talk about confusing the poor little kids. And, this tells you a little bit about the kind of bubble that they live in, right? That this teacher thought this would be an okay idea to send this letter home with fifth grade kids. Obviously, the parents did not approve, not quite brainwashed enough, and so it ended up becoming a national scandal. But again, I think it reveals insight into the broader problems we have in the so-called government education system.
What I find interesting about your story is that the principal, to some degree the superintendent, all their gut-level knee-jerk reaction was to support this confused teacher who's confusing her students 100%. And then when predictably the blowback, even, I suppose there's hope, right? Even in a town as liberal as Tallahassee, these particular Tallahassee parents were outraged. And so to some small degree, the school walked it back a little bit. Tell us what the accommodations they made.
Yeah, they did. Originally, as you said, the initial instinctive reaction of the leadership in the school district and at the school, the principal and the school district initially expressed support for this madness. They say, "Oh, we certainly support the teacher in being called a gender-neutral pronouns or whatever." But then, as you mentioned, it actually became an international scandal. I mean, even newspapers overseas were reporting on this madness. Talk about embarrassing for my state. But it became a big international scandal, and then suddenly they said, well, we're sorry for any confusion this might have caused, and we're going to work hard to make sure confusion like that doesn't happen again. And they tried to reassure the parents that no, we're not going to be brainwashing your kids into being confused about their gender, and of course we know they are. But, the fact that this happened to begin with, I mean, if that doesn't show you need to get your kids out of the government school, I don't know what will. I mean, what needs to be happening? Does the school building need to be on fire before parents finally say, oh, wait a minute, that's probably not a safe place for my kids?
All of those odd, though, explanations. We're not going to brainwash your kids. We apologize for the confusion. We're not going to confuse your kids. What I didn't hear from the school is, what are you going to have those kids call that teacher? Did that get resolved, or did we always just
It did not.
It did not get resolved. So in other words, we apologize, we're sorry, we'll be careful in the future, but we're going to completely ignore the issue. We are not going to retract what was said to our kids and our kids' parents. We're going to assume that our students, our elementary school kids, are going to react to the parent, to the teacher, the way the teacher wants. Is that what we can assume?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, they assured the parents that the kids will be called by their normal pronouns, right? Because actually in the letter the teacher suggested that it would be up to the kids what pronoun they wanted to be called. But then the school administrator said, no, all the kids will be called by their normal pronouns, and the issue was not resolved. So presumably, they did give some leeway there, right? The teacher came out and said, I know it takes practice to be able to remember that you should call me mixed breastneck and whatever. And presumably the kids won't be punished for calling her miss or female. But it's unfortunately the issue was not resolved. I think they had some PR crisis meetings when they realized oh wait, the whole world doesn't believe this kind of lunacy that we consider normal here. And I think they tried to do as little as possible to avoid having a mass exodus from the schools, but without really upsetting the apple cart in terms of the spread of this crazy ideology in the government school system.
Typical government school reaction. Apologize, and change nothing, punish nobody, reverse nothing. This is typical. And in relationship to this issue, Alex, we've had a number of readers write in and ask us questions. And one of the questions that they really wanted to see us discuss briefly, and I think this is a good place to do it, is explain to us, let's have a conversation. Why in the world, when you think about all these Christian moms and dads, like many of these Tallahassee parents, who apparently are willing to accept this non-apology, and keep their kids in that school, why aren't more Christian families, just in the sake of their own faith, for the sake of their own sanity and kids' mental health, why are they leaving their kids in these schools? Why does it take something like this for Christian parents to get angry, and a simple non-apology from the school is enough to make them tip their hat and go send the kids right back again? What's going on in the mindset of American Christian parents?
Well, I think part of the blame should be with pastors. Pastors have not only not warned, and obviously I'm speaking generally, certainly there are some exceptions, but pastors have not adequately warned their congregations, their flocks, about the dangers. And so a lot of Christian parents, they go to church on Sunday, they see maybe the pastor sends their own kids to a government school, in a worst case scenario, in a best case scenario, maybe there's some minor warnings, but the pastors are scared to maybe they're going to scare away a donor or a congregant or something. And so I think a lot of it is up to just ignorance. But it's such a crucial point, Duke. I mean, it's just, the Nehemiah Institute has done some research into this, and they found something like 75 to 85% of the children of Christian parents going through these indoctrination centers will end up leaving the church by the time they're done with their brainwashing regimen, which consists of 12 to 15 years of government so-called education. So you would think that the churches, from their own, well-being standpoint, would say, well, hey, we better warn parents about this. We're not going to have a church in the future with all the kids being brainwashed into the secular humanism and being brainwashed against Christianity. And I think, part of it is the parents' ignorance, right? They don't realize how extreme the situation has gotten in the schools. They don't realize that the schools have been deliberately designed by people like John Dewey, one of the signers of the First Humanist Manifesto, to erode and to destroy the faith of these children, the faith of the children in biblical religion. And part of it, though, it has to be blamed on the parents. Your kids are the most important job you have in life. And if you're not taking the time and doing the due diligence that you need to do to see who you're trusting your kids with for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day for 12, 15 years, something is wrong there. And I think parents, you need to take a long, hard look at yourselves, and pastors and the entire Christian community needs to say, we need to sit down, we need to examine this, and we need to start taking serious action to deal with this.
I've given hundreds and hundreds of talks across the country, many in churches, and we've been amazed. I've been amazed traveling the country trying to warn moms and dads about Common Core and issues like this gender appropriation of our middle and high school, elementary schools. And I can't tell you how many pastors I've encountered who don't want us to speak at their church because there are some public school teachers in the audience. Some of their congregants are public school teachers. And so therefore, the pastor is afraid of offending them. And so the idea that we would expose the broader parishionate, the broader membership of that church to what's going on in the public schools can't go on. It is staggering. I mean, the lack of, the unwillingness to take moral authority for the choices and the actions of their parishioners is simply staggering. And you said it right. It's not just Nehemiah. We have all sorts of evidence that shows that you can pray with your kids, you can take them to church twice a week, you could have them in Sunday school, you could have them participate in church activities, all sorts of things like that. But if you send your kids to public government schools 8 hours a day, you are all but guaranteeing that all that effort and work and time you're spending on their religious life is going to leave them by the time they graduate for college. So you're exactly right. We need a pastorate. We need a group of clerical leaders to stand up and stop being unwilling. To preach the gospel of Christ is to offend worldliness. And I can think of nothing more worldly, no more innately and corruptly worldly than the way we educate kids in government schools. You cannot reconcile a public school education with your Christianity anymore. And unless moms and dads realize this, they are really selling out their kids. The kids have all the vacations, they have the iPads, the laptops, the Nike shoes, they have their piano lessons, their football practice. But what they won't have 25 years from now, they will remember none of that. They will remember none of that stuff. What they will remember when they find themselves 25 years down the road is how they lost their faith and how they ended up being utterly indistinguishable from other secular members of the community.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Duke. And, I sympathize with a lot of the government school teachers. I know some fantastic ones who are doing their best within the constraints of this system. But among the ones I know, they all realize that the public school is not a safe place for your children. I know many, many government school teachers, and they all homeschool their kids. And that should tell us all something very, very important. I sympathize with the teachers. I am a teacher myself, fortunately, in a nice private school that does not preach anti-Christian hysteria. But it's, if people are offended by the truth, that's an issue for them to resolve. We cannot abdicate our responsibility to speak the truth just because somebody might get offended. And if you're a public school teacher and you're in a church, you know these things, right? You're not going to be being told anything that you don't know already. And so I would hope that the pastors and the parents and everybody in the community would get together and say, enough of this, we got to protect the kids, and this is not going to continue.
Alex, thank you so much for this, and I hope all of you out there in the audience who've wanted an answer to that question have a sense of it. Please feel free to send your comments into the takeaway at Freedom Project, and we'd be glad to talk about issues that appeal to you, the audience, anytime down the road. Happy to do that. FreedomProject.com. Check us out. Thanks again, Alex. If you enjoyed this video and all of our videos, please consider a tax-deductible donation so we can keep the whole thing free for you. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for watching.